thinking about it. So mate, yeah, just want to dive into your background. I listened to a bit of that podcast that I mentioned to you with that guy that you knew from back home in WA. I know you got another one with your missus, or someone talking to you about your missus's birth process and you being present for the birth. I haven't listened to that yet, but I see that content's there. And I don't know if you or I followed each other on LinkedIn, but yeah, no, I think maybe you liked a few things that I did or something like that. And I was just like, and then I saw your ASCA thing come up. I was like, I'm going to talk to this fucking dude, see what's going on. So, yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah, nice, mate. I don't remember. I think I may have followed you when I saw you may have popped up and doing the cool work that you do. And that's super in alignment with what I like to do with my athletes. And so I just thought we were on the same vibe and loved your work and wanted to reach out and tell you that you're doing a good job, because
how good.
there's not enough people doing it. So
yeah, let's explore that tonight, or your morning, my night. So before we get into this, I usually get people to do just 10 breaths, eyes closed, into the heart space, hand on your heart. And just so we're both, really dropping into this. And you can hear me really clearly, by the way, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah. So just drawing our awareness to our breathing, long, smooth, effortless breath, in the nose, out the nose. Subtle awareness of the heart space and looking to feel like we're breathing in and out through our heart, and to bring that sense of effortless ease and calm and fluidity with that breathing into that heart space for another 7 breaths. Grounding and connecting and opening into that heart space. Really dropping into that deeper part of ourselves. Three more. One more. And a bit more fire. Let's breathe in the nose, out the mouth for 3. Bigger, more powerful. When you're ready, mate. Eyes open. How you feeling 5 a.m.?
Mate, feeling fresh, that's for sure.
And your last name pronunciation, Tropiano?
Yep, on the money.
Tropiano. All right, make sure this thing's on silent. All right, bud. Anything off limits that you don't want me to talk about?
No, mate, let's fucking get into it.
Cool.
Let's go deep.
Welcome back to the Love Over Fear podcast. And today's guest is Kurt Tropiano. Kurt, how are you, buddy?
Going really well, thanks, mate.
Brother, I appreciate you're in Montreal, Canada currently. So you're up at 5 a.m., meaning you got up at 4 something, and that is always an ugly looking time on the hour clock. So thanks so much for getting up. And I know you've got a near or around about 1-year-old. So yeah, appreciate your effort and intention with showing up today, mate.
You're welcome, mate. Thank you for having me. And we're just grateful that it's a podcast and you can't really see the bags under my eyes at the moment.
Well, you can't hear the bags. You sound good. Uh,
Exactly.
Kurt, would you like to introduce your title as what you do for a profession and also what you do within that profession?
Yeah, Mitch. So I'm a high performance coach, and within that is strength and conditioning and working with athletes on the mental, emotional, and energetic part of their performance. And it's something that's been a passion my whole life. And now really starting to own what I do there and to get out there and yeah, and really own that. And really, because to me that's always been a part of what I've loved. And yeah, to me, you can't have one without the other. So you can't just be physically strong and not have a strong heart, a strong will, a strong energy, a strong mind to be able to perform at your best. And I always felt that it got overlooked when growing up, when going through the S&C field and in that performance space, I always felt that it got overlooked a little bit.
Mm. And do you want to describe your journey as a coach, purely like S&C experience, just to sort of lay a bit of a platform of, where that all began and where you've been and where you are now?
Yeah, so my S&C experience began at East Fremantle Football Club, where I was playing. I finished playing there and then went straight into coaching the Colts team. And through that, provided experiences at the state 16s level in doing some helping out some coaching there. And then that moved to the seniors at Peel Thunder, and which put a little time into working with the Fremantle Dockers on the side with that. And from there, being there for a year, it was great. I managed the program there and wanted to experience more, because to that point I'd mainly just been in football, obviously love football, but felt that only had one type of experience. So after going to an internship, an Exos internship over in Sydney, I met a few people and they turned me on to Altus, which was formerly the World Athletics Centre. So it's a private centre in Phoenix, and they train track and field athletes. So I went over with my own money and spent 3 months there doing an internship, and that was absolutely awesome. That was the first place I saw that really opened my eyes up to a real holistic program within coaching athletes and showed me what was possible. And from there, ended up coming back home and actually, struggled to find work for a little bit there. And so I went and actually coached in a summer camp in the US. So at the time, I really enjoyed traveling. I really enjoyed North American sports, the whole thing there. So any chance I got to go to the US was awesome at that point in time. So I actually went and coached at a summer camp in Pennsylvania near Scranton, if you know the office, and yeah, did that for 8 weeks, and then traveled around and found myself in Vancouver working as an S&C coach at a private studio there. And from there, 2 weeks after I started there, I got an email to go and ask if I was interested in working for the NBA in China. And I said, well, yes, obviously. And so that took me to Xinjiang, which is right under Russia and right next to Kazakhstan, at the top of China. And that was a hell of an experience there, that's for sure. And then from there, ended up going and doing a bit more traveling, and then ended up back in Shanghai and working at a private studio there, and then for the Shanghai Institute of Sport, which was my last role.
And all the while, when you started, in those days when you stopped playing and you're in the Colts, and all the way through that journey that led you up into your Shanghai in that institute, what do you think your sort of specialities kind of became, your tools as a strength and conditioning coach? What ended up being your strong suit, do you believe?
Yeah, I think being able to connect with the athletes and connected with the coaches, the different personalities, the different energies. I think that is one of my strong suits in amongst that, being able to connect to people and connect with them genuinely and from the heart. And that is one of my strong suits. And I found that even from an early age. And so I could always learn that. I felt I could always learn the technical side of things. I could always learn new techniques and learn how to coach in different ways and whatnot. But the connection is where it all begins. And the connection is what elicits buy-in. The connection is what the players will feel when they feel your passion to help them get places. And that's what I've always had. I guess that's because that's what I always wanted as an athlete, is for my coach to be like, hey, this is what you need to do. This is how I'm going to support you and get you there. And we got this together.
So it's been about that individual person and how you're going to tap into, their inequalities and enable that to be expressed on that physical plane of either training or on the sporting field. Yeah.
And it's always been there from a young age. So within me. So yeah, that's a great way to put it.
We spoke a bit off air, and you also spoke to me, or you mentioned something the other day that we were writing back and forth on our phones, sort of like you coming out and being more open and showcasing your real qualities as a coach and how you can express yourself as an individual coach. Can you tell me where that sort of awareness of person and heart comes from, and where that begins within your journey?
Yeah, so that begins squarely with my mum at a young age. So mum would teach us how to meditate and breathe when we were kids, to calm us down, to get us to go to sleep. And so from that young age, mum taught us to have awareness of ourselves, awareness of our heart, awareness of who we were. And dad supported as well, but that's really where mum came in. And as we grew up, we grew up in quite a spiritual household in that sense, being that we believed that we could create our own reality. We believed that we were supported in whatever we did, and that I took to that like a duck to water, and really loved how I would learn more about myself and go deeper within myself. And that's really what sparked learning about the breath. And that's what sparked, learning about my mind and how I could be stronger. And I gravitated to those cricket players like Justin Langer and Steve Waugh, who would play their best when the time got tough, because they would stand up in those times. And that's something I always wanted to pride myself on. And I always wanted to be like that. And with that comes self-awareness along the way of learning who you are, and learning, what you want to bring into the world and who you want to be. And as the journey went on, people came into my life that would help deepen that. And I've been working with a Rishi for the last 11 years on that energy, on that personal side, on that heart, and on becoming all of who I can be, and support others in the ways that I'm gifted here to do that.
And for those who don't know what a Rishi is, mate, do you want to explain that, and what type of mentor can do for an individual?
Yeah, so a Rishi is like an Indian sage, quite simply, and someone who's right well connected within themselves and the universe, and have been lucky enough to be working with him for a number of years now, and really just helps you get on the path that you're supposed to be on, for your soul this lifetime. And it's as simple as that. You would think it's as simple as that, actually, but showing up and being who you truly are here is it's not the easiest thing in the world, and it's something that I'm really enjoying stepping into properly, fully, and embodying that.
So that sort of takes me into what I started off this part of this conversation, was you wanting to be seen more, you expressing yourself in the way that you want to be. And obviously, your mentor there has had a huge role in that. For anyone who might be listening to this, whether they're an athlete or they're a coach, in this sporting space, you and I both know that that kind of dialogue is not a very common place in an elite high performance setting. For the most part, it's all about treating the man like a machine, if you will, and going through all these processes and outcomes and setups to help someone's physical body to function at its highest caliber possible. What's it been like for you, having such a high awareness of your internal landscape, and knowing the effect that working with other people's internal landscapes is definitely a strong pathway forward to elevating their overall performance? What's it been like trying to navigate that and bring that into an environment where, for the most part, it hasn't really existed that much?
Yeah, I guess obviously early on in the journey, and being exposed to this so young, and growing up as it, right? So it's not coming into it. It's been a part of who I am for a very long time. It was always, could always see it like that, but was afraid to a certain degree to speak what's going on. You're young, you're a young coach, what do you know? And like, these systems are in place, these big systems, and it's always been there, but it hasn't been shown so much for me, right? It hasn't been spoken about, it hasn't been shown, it hasn't been coaching like that, going through the years, but slowly, it's because it's part of who I am, it's got to come through in some way, shape or form. And so it does slowly come through. But in the last, I'd say to my last job, the Shanghai Institute, where I was essentially given a lot of free rein to do my thing. And so there was giving me the opportunity to come in and bring in my flavor, bring in what I believe and how to coach, and all the assets of performance. And also in China, you get a bit more flexibility because the training is a bit behind, I would say, a little bit. It's a lot more volume, it's a lot of hard work. And I just get a lot more flavor with that. So it's slowly come through, and as much as it's finally come through in my last training, I could feel it. The idea of stepping into another place that doesn't feel the same way I do about performance, or a similar way to a performance, or isn't open-minded to this, makes my gut twist up a little bit. The idea of stepping into another place that doesn't go like that as well, because you're right, there's not a lot of talk about it, there's not a lot of wording about it, and it's slowly opening up. But for me, if I needed to step into an environment where I needed to be fully sanitized in who I was around this, would be a big struggle, I think, for me.
And so, that's a huge journey that an individual needs to take to become who they are and express themselves on every level. What would you say to someone who's hearing this and thinking, wow, like, I really want to be living from that deeper, more authentic place? What's something you'd say to someone who knows they have that inequality, but they're just not there on the actioning part of it just yet?
You've got to do it. You've got to be brave enough to do it, because it'll just eat you up otherwise. And that's what I'd say. If it's who you are, then you have to live who you are, regardless of what's going on. And you can be smart about it, right? You don't have to. If it's really going to rub people up the wrong way and things like that, I mean, that's part of positive change, but it doesn't need to be so in your face. You can subtly start doing little things. All right, so you can subtly start. So I started by subtly bringing breathing into the warm up, then in the session, and then recovery. Just slowly bringing it in, and then all of a sudden you start getting a little bit more buy-in from the athletes and coaches around you, and you can do a little bit more, and that's the best way to go about eliciting change, especially in an environment that may not be super open to it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Sometimes that part of you that's been sitting in there waiting for an opportunity to express itself just wants to like put it all out there in one power swoop. But I think that's some awesome advice, to be calculated and just drip feed that out there and get your feedback and adjust. So that's solid. I listened to your ASCA chat, the Australian Strength and Conditioning every year hold a conference. I'm assuming because of COVID, they did the majority of that online. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine I'm right. And so you presented, I listened to it, I enjoyed it. But I think it'd be great to understand, like you just said then, I'm bringing breathing into warm up and I'm bringing it to within session and for recovery and so on. Let's go through what you know and what you've learned, and let's get an understanding of what this, your version of what your brick wall of techniques is, and let's pull them apart and understand them. So where's the first experience this after your mum was teaching you how to meditate? Where does it grow from there?
Yeah, it grows from there. It went to experiencing all different kinds of breath through all different modalities. So, and this is just on the journey. So for example, like reading the works of like Eckhart Tolle with the breath to become more present, and picking up little tiny bits from there, and then being introduced to Wim Hof and doing some of his work and understanding the physical aspect of that, results of that, and then also studying under my auntie, who's a holotropic breathwork facilitator, and learning a whole different style of breath under her, and taking part in Kundalini yoga and understanding different breaths within that. And so it's been little add-ons through the journey of learning and curiosity and things like that, and then topping it off with learning things like the Oxygen Advantage and Breathe books and XBT course of breathing, and putting them all together really, and understanding that I've had these tools all along and they've been part of my daily practice for years, and eliciting them into a performance environment where it's not overly common, and it's kind of simple but not overly common, and then adding intent and heart within that is absolute key. And so that's a quick overview of the journey within that, Mitch.
Yeah, great. What is holotropic breathwork, and how does that work, and how do you see that supporting athletes?
Yeah, so holotropic breathwork is quite deep, and it taps into the vagus nerve, and so it's breathing. It'll be continuously breathing circular in and out of the mouth for an hour plus, and it can, what it does is it can tap in and help you release trauma, stress, anxiety. It can help you gain clarity on things, on vision. You can see things, and it's the way I see that supporting is because it's a lot deeper. It takes you need a lot of care, but you can release a lot of trauma from the body and from your cells. And I see that supporting athletes, so much within that, but also limiting beliefs that you have about yourself. You can really sort of go deep within yourself just by using the power of the breath, as opposed to needing to get there in another fashion. And it can really expose what you may be, keeping under wraps, in terms of you may not want to deal with some trauma that you had at a young age, or a bad performance, and shift it through that. But that needs to be walked into with someone who's ready to be open to possibly experiencing that, because it's not always like that. And I see it supporting athletes in that way, but they have to be ready to walk into that, because that's a lot heavier, and it requires a lot of space to be held. That requires a very safe container. So, but that's I always get so excited with that work.
But I think in those matters, the moments that matter the most, the ones where you're under the most pressure, if you want to call it that, it's those traumas from the past, or those failures, or those things that we tend to relive when we're connected to that stress. Yeah. And so it's things like holotropic breathwork that can help you release the original time and place where you felt, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, whatever it is, to enable you to, when you arrive at those large moments, to finally succeed. Is that what I'm hearing from yourself?
Yeah, and it's just releasing the baggage that's within there as well, which is the heaviness that you may hold over those things that you may not even know that you're still carrying as well. So it's almost cleaning you out so that you can hold more in the space that you're and whatever you're doing as well. So, and yeah, I was going to say, I might give it an example if that's okay, mate, just to make a little bit more than welcome. And I'll give an example from my experience, because everyone else's experience is private with themselves. So I consider myself quite aware, and I spend a lot of time getting myself, doing a lot of work on myself to, release things when they come up, and, become really aware about that. And a couple of years ago, hadn't done a breath work in a while, but a family member of mine was quite sick for a period there, and I was really close to them. And for me, it affected me, because I went and supported for quite a long time, and spent time, making sure they were okay. And I thought I'd dealt with that. We moved on, I've got another job, moved to a different country. I thought I dealt with that. I thought I released it, it was spoken about it, everything like that. They were doing well, they were moving forward, progressing. And then I did a breathwork, almost 2 years after the fact. And, 30 minutes in, all of a sudden they come front of mind, into the mind's eye, and I just start bawling my eyes out. And all the feelings that I had of, all the struggles I had with seeing my favorite person like that, and how hard it was for me and how hard it was for them. And I just cried for a good 30 minutes. And after that, got up, felt 100 times lighter, and went about life, and gave them a call, told them how much I loved them, and continued on. But the point I'm making is that I thought that I dealt with that. I thought that I'd done a lot of work around that to make sure I'd released it and was okay around it, but I didn't realize I was still holding some of that in my heart. And so it allowed me to release that. And you don't know sometimes.
It's like that power of the breath. It can just make you aware, as you said, of the things that you just completely blindsided about. And I suppose, the clearer the runway, as one of my mentors would say, the easier you can land the airplane. Or the thing that I'm thinking about is, if we can do more of this clearing work for athletes, then when they're out on the sporting field, they just have way more access to themselves, their skills, their techniques, and all those things that, you pick up along the way. Like you mentioned, looking after that loved one and feeling quite emotionally attached to that period of time. We don't need that anymore. And it's just such a great way to, release and move forward. That's awesome. That's great. So that sort of gives a bit of insight into the holotropic breath work. I suppose we can put that in the basket of therapy to release emotions and certain experiences that are no longer serving us. Let's go to Wim Hof and that experience. Where does that journey begin for you?
That journey began when I was in Vancouver, and I joined one of the local men's groups that were going on there, meeting another guy, invited me into men's group, and coming in and doing masterminds, once a week, jumping on calls and supporting and those sorts of things. And, Wim Hof was, I think, becoming quite big at the time. And so we were all sort of doing his program and learning how to breathe in his way, in his method, and exploring cold exposure and things like that. So, and I was learning that in Vancouver in the winter for that period of time. So it was fantastic. It was straight into the fire. And so that's when I first learned how to, use the breath to warm up the body, how to use the breath to build that fire within, and what it could do physically and how you could measure it physically. So for example, over the space of 12 weeks, I think it was, I went from holding my breath for 30 seconds to be able to do it for almost 5 minutes. And went from push-ups. I'm not really good at push-ups, actually, guys, being a strength and conditioning coach. I went from like 20 push-ups to like 60 push-ups within that time as well, in a breath hold. And I was like, all right, well, look what the breath can do for the body in this small example. So what else can it do? Where else can we go with this? And that sort of, and yeah, Wim exposed me to that, as well as cold exposure and the benefits and the mental side of things that it brings, the mental resilience that it brings around that.
Let's look at this and pull it apart a bit more and learn and understand the performance implications. So Wim Hof, typically we're doing 30 deep, powerful diaphragmatic breaths, 30 breaths. We're doing a exhalation hold for as long as you can kind of tolerate, hold for 15, the inhale 15, hold, and that's exhale 1 round, we're back into 30. And anywhere from 3 rounds or more is what you can do there. After that, just like you alluded to, your body is in a highly oxygenated state. You've really blown off a lot of CO2 and you've left a lot of O2. And so like what you're saying there, you can do a lot more push-ups, or when you do go into the cold, that sort of natural instinct to almost hyperventilate is dissipated, so you can endure more cold conditions. Can you explain in more detail from your end and going through that process, what's happening physiologically and what is it enabling you to do, and why does it enable you to achieve those feats that I sort of touched on there?
Yeah, so you said it perfectly. It's dumping a lot of CO2 and oxygenating the body. And what happens is the body breathes because the brain signals it to breathe when the carbon dioxide reaches a certain level. So everyone has a carbon dioxide tolerance. And if your CO2 tolerance is poor, then you're going to breathe, then the body's going to signal you to breathe earlier, quickly. You're going to be able to hold your breath for 10 seconds and it's going to be like, come on, you're going to die, you need to breathe. So you're building your carbon dioxide tolerance. Well, in that state with the Wim Hof, your body's so oxygenated that the body, you can relax into it also when you bring awareness to it, and your body doesn't need to breathe. So your oxygen level in the body might be close to 98, 99% with that, and you can actually hold it for a longer period of time. And when you practice that as well, when you bring awareness to that, then all of a sudden you can sit into that state and be like, okay, well, I'm not going to die. I've held my breath for a minute already and I'm feeling fantastic. And it's like, all right, well, how long can we go for? And when you bring the mind into it as well and push it a little bit further each time, you understand that you can actually control that and become a control of your nervous system a little bit more within that.
And there's another aspect to that, obviously breathing heavily mainly through the mouth is very sympathetic dominant. There's talk of higher levels of adrenaline being released and potential health implications for that. Can you explain your angle and understanding of what that is and what the Wim Hof breathing does to turn that system on?
Yeah. So because we normally nasal breathe, well, proper breathing is nasal breathing. When you do tap into the mouth, you are tapping into that sympathetic nervous system, and it's a good way to tap into that if you're aware of it, right? And so that's why I would use a little bit in my warm up to tap into that nervous system. And I know offline, you asked me about that a bit about that, Mitch, and I found that really positive to use in that time, because most of the time it'd be in early afternoon session in the warm up. And for example, my handball girls had just rolled out of bed after eating lunch and after napping for an hour, and they'd all just stroll in, groggy and, pretty flat into the gym. And so I wanted a quick way to tap into and wake them up really quickly, so that we could get the best out of them for that session. And so it's all about, I think, where it's used and why you use it as well. And so for the Wim Hof side of things, I don't think you should just do that kind of breathing, but I think that breathing is probably best, and how I've used it best is in the morning to wake myself up, like before this podcast at 5 a.m. in the morning to get me kicking a little bit more, to wake up and connect to the body in that way. With the breath holds in there as well, I find it a good way to tap into you, because it's so quiet. So your body's still in that time. And I find that when you're off and when you're not connected, your mind will pull you out of those breath holds easily. And I found that within myself, at least, right? It's like if I can't sit still and if I'm not quietening down, then my breath holds will, be 30, 40 seconds, because I'm not concentrating on being present. And it's also educating around that as well when you're doing the breath, because awareness and intent is such an important thing. And so back to your original question, Mitch, on, because it's so sympathetic based, is that doing harm? Possibly for the wrong person, I think. But I don't think it's as black and white as that as well. So for me, you need to know your athletes and to what they need in that period of time, and give them the tools to be able to reach it at the proper times as well. So I like it because you bring that awareness to it. So it's a really good question.
I think that's something really important to talk about, because if you do more than 3, let's say you do 6 rounds of that and you're driving that sympathetic dominance, maybe it's the end of the season, maybe we've just lost a prelim final and now we've got to go to the repertoire match or whatever it is, and that may be too much for someone after a season to be banging out set after set of that deeper, powerful, sympathetic, driving those fight or flight hormones through the body. But I think it's really cool to what you said. You can just take a hint of what Wim's getting at, which is basically to energize the body. And, if you've got athletes that are in a stressed environment and we're in a part of the year which is a bit challenging, you probably can just do, like you said, just some of that in a warm-up to just shake off a little bit of grogginess. But I don't think that's very clear exactly, in the sporting landscape of where these things should sit. So that's why I love why we're having this conversation. Would you agree with what I just said there?
I would agree with what you just said. And that's why you need to have a tool of all these other different kinds of breathing as well, like the heart resonant breathing and box breathing, triangle breathing, cadence breathing, all these different kinds of breath that can give you the tools to what you need at that period of time. and to place them at the right place during that time.
The next thing that makes so much sense to unpack is Patrick McKeown's work. Is McKeown the right pronunciation of his last name?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. And so he's becoming quite popular in the athletic landscape for providing breathing strategies and tools and programs to elevate performance, as well as the book that James Nestor released. It's probably a year or more ago now, which has similarities to what Patrick's talking about, which is the importance of nose breathing. I had a mentor who has unfortunately passed away last year, and he was about 10 years ahead of all this. And he'd be watching people moving, and he'd be saying to me, Mitchell, you see that young man who's running at his high capacity, and his head's forward and his mouth is open and he's, looking for air. Can you see how detrimental that is to his A, structure, and B, his overall performance? And I was like, oh yeah, like I never really looked at that sort of thing before. And so Patrick and James, being such high advocates for nose breathing, do you want to educate myself and the listeners on their work and the significance of nasal breathing, just to start off this part of the conversation?
Yeah, so firstly, if anyone hasn't read, especially James Nestor's book, I would say, because it's a nice and very enjoyable read, go and do it, because I think everyone should read Breathe by James Nestor. That should be hands down. That should be in schools, I reckon. And he basically, long story short, he did not breathe well. He had mouth problems and nasal problems, and basically got introduced to it in a meditation session, and from there sparked his curiosity, and he himself went and made it his mission to learn all he could about breathing, and took part in a study at Stanford, and found that by switching his breathing to nose breathing, long story short, by switching it to nose breathing, nasal breathing, that his mouth problems cleared up. When he figured out the tongue position, like all that cleared up. He lost his sleep apnea. He was able to perform better when he went to the gym. His mouth, I think his mouth widened even, and all these things changed and shift for him. And he took the time to dive into all these different modalities and to figure out what really worked and to really learn and get the science behind them. And Patrick McKeown has done that similar, but also more in the performance side of things, I would say, in working with people on that, and teaching how to develop CO2 tolerance, which we spoke about a bit earlier, through things like breath hold walks and nasal breathing only at higher intensities and things like that. So both of them have done some great work in the field, and I would say almost lead the way for that niche.
For the stereotypical athlete, maybe, for whatever reason they're doing some maximal aerobic speed work. And for those who don't know what maximal aerobic speed work, you're typically running at speeds of like 120% of your speed that you're running at when you're hitting your VO2 max, which is your point of maximum oxygen uptake that your body can handle at that point in time. Am I good with that? Did I get that out right?
You did that really well.
So we're putting athletes into situations where they're going to be huffing and puffing, basically. Now, at uni, in a lot of team environments, there's that part, which is really cool and a fantastic way to build your anaerobic and aerobic capacities. But one of the main things that feeds that system is oxygen, but no one knows how to breathe. So can you run me through how we should be teaching people, especially in that environment, because maximal aerobic speed is such a standard training tool these days, or any high intensity training for that matter. What should we be doing, and how do we need to do it to move forward and do that more effectively?
Yeah, so the place we should start anywhere is learning how to breathe properly and making sure that we can breathe properly in different positions, in standing and sitting and lying, and getting that right. Because if you can't breathe properly at rest, there's no way in hell you're going to be able to do it when you're at 110 your capacity. So you should breathe. Proper breathing, quite simply, is in and out through the nose. It should be imperceptible. You shouldn't be able to notice it. You should be breathing, deep into your belly, deep into the diaphragm, and then filling up into your chest. And then the opposite on the way out. You should fill up through the sides so that there's like a tire around your waist and you're filling up the tire. And it should be effortless. And so you shouldn't be moving your shoulders. Your shoulders shouldn't shift. You shouldn't have to work for it. And it should be breathing in, breathing in nice and easily. And it should be nice and deep. And what we mean by that is deep into the diaphragm, but not deep as in, but more of a deep, long, slow breath, bringing it in. And that's quite simple. And to do that, to figure out the best way to do that, what I like to do is have your hands on your belly and your chest and close your eyes and connect into, see what's moving first and to notice your breath. And so I think awareness is a big part of that as well, Mitch, and teaching people to be aware of their breath, aware of their body, aware of how that feels in their body. How does it feel to breathe properly? And when you bring that awareness to it, then all of a sudden you can take that awareness to, when you're out and you're running and all of a sudden you check in with yourself and you're like, okay, I've been mouth breathing here for a long time here. And am I really at 110% where I need to mouth breathe? Let's say, no, okay, we'll come back to the nose as soon as you can. Come back to the nose and bring it back down. And so you'd start there with proper breathing, Mitch, and then from there I would start to teach the athletes to do it under a little bit higher conditions. So all of a sudden, teaching them breath holds with to build up the tolerance a little bit more. So moving from normally in and out breathing to something like a triangle breath with a breath hold in there. Can they handle building up a CO2 just a little bit over a period of 5 minutes? And then moving from that to something like a box, and then see if they can control it with a cadence breath and being able to control the exhale. Because if they can control the exhale, then all of a sudden when they're recovering, they can control that exhale. And that's what we want to control as you bring down to the recovering. And then from there, I might test them a bit more with the CO2 tolerance stuff and put in a little walk hold, and then progress them from there and teach them about breathing gears, Mitch, which is basically moving up like you would in a car. So as your heart rate continues, as you start to get a bit more intense with your training, you move from nose to nose mouth to mouth, and that's gear 5. And then coming back down the opposite way. So as soon as you finish at that intensity mouth, as soon as you can get to nose mouth, you tap into nose mouth, and then you drop back down to nose and recovery. And the quicker we can tap to the nose, the quicker we can control the breath. Because when we breathe in and out through our mouth, just like we spoke with holotropic breathing, you're dumping CO2 the more you're breathing out through your mouth. And the quicker we can get to the nose, it'll balance it back down and also control that rate of breath a bit more and be able to get us to recover quicker.
So interesting, isn't it? Because when you start to head off on this journey of having a higher tolerance for CO2 and not wanting to be, rushing to find oxygen to soothe your system that you think it needs. You have to have a bit of an ego check, I reckon. And that's an interesting part of all this, because like you said, you need to take it back to your breathing dynamics and what that looks like you just explained before. But also your tempo of training, once you start becoming active with your intention to be breathing mainly through your nose, has to come back down again. And I feel like a lot of people that I've trained who have really efficient motors, like they can put out some serious watts over a long period of time on a bike, and they can do a lot of good stuff. It's like, why the hell would I want to go backwards when I've already achieved so much, and my motor is, compared to these other people, I'm doing quite well. So I think, can you explain the adaptations and the benefits as to why someone wants to lie down and learn how to breathe into their tummy and do all that, and then, well, wow, like, my max speed of my running has to decrease so much because, at that speed I'm used to breathing through my mouth. Like, why are we actually doing all this? Where's the efficiencies at?
Yeah, well, you actually hit the right word at the end, and that's efficiency. And so it's all about how you coach it, right? Because you've got to get the athletes buy-in. So that's super important. So how you explain it and sell it to the athlete is everything to get them to buy into this. But why we are doing it is for the efficiency, because if you can clean up that breathing efficiency, then you're going to be operating that's covered. You're going to be operating as best you can at your oxygen intake and expelling waste at the same time, right? So you're operating optimal in that area, and you've got that covered. Mm-hmm. And that, which is a limiter for so many people, is covered. You're good. So that everything else you do is on top of that. Your efficiency, your foundation is set. You're done, because your breath is everything, as you said. And you explain that to the athlete. I give them a little bit of both, Mitch, to start, right, for that buy-in, so that they could possibly see it a little bit better as well. So with their motor, you wouldn't do, well, at least I wouldn't do in my coaching only nasal breathing for running. I give, maybe there's a couple sets nasal breathing, or maybe there's a day where we're going to do nasal breathing, but there's another day where you're going to go gun home. But you're going to make sure that you're using the gears so that you progress through them properly, and your efficiency is there with the gears to reach that top. So it's about selling them on there as well, Mitch, to make sure that they're involved with that. But efficiency is the big selling point, and they'll see it. So you expose them a little bit to it, and you get them to run and do that stuff, and get them to use the breathing gears, and they will see it. And all of a sudden they'll be like, oh, okay, all right, okay, this is an exponential jump in what I've been doing just from a little bit of work. What else can we do to get it right, to push this even further? So helping them see it early is a big part of it as well. And that's different for every athlete, right? I had, a lot of the younger handball girls I had, especially, they smashed it in the time trial just because they held nasal breathing for as long as they could, which was about 8 laps out of 10 or whatever it was. And the older girls all of a sudden were like, oh, okay, so what did you do differently? Yeah, actually breathe like that, and bringing attention to it. And it's like, okay, it works. So that's a part of getting buy-in as well in some points, Mitch.
I watched, I'm not sure if the pronunciation is right, Kipchoge, the I think Ethiopian marathon runner, at the Tokyo Games, and the dude is sprinting maximally, like in this marathon. His lips are tightly sealed together, and he's just nose breathing, and every now and again he chucks out a bit of a smile. I think if there's any doubt in anyone's mind, the benefit and overall then development of their systems, like that's the footage you want to watch to understand what's going on here. He looks so light, he looks so fluid, and then there's that word there, efficiency, and there's no doubt that that's leading to performance. Have you seen that run that he did, or any other runs?
I haven't seen that, but that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's working at its capacity.
Mm. And I think some of the other interesting things, it's like if you ask someone, do you think it'd be a good idea to take, 5 deep breaths before you start your run? Everyone go, oh yeah, a couple of deep breaths. But in reality, there you're blowing off, um, you're increasing your oxygen in your system. You're blowing off CO2, so you're blowing out carbon. But the interesting thing about carbon, and the reason that you would want to build up your tolerance, is because carbon dioxide is, and you can help me navigate this terminology if it's not quite right, but it is triggering and driving oxygen to the cells in the system in the body to get it to where it needs to go. So if you're doing all these heavy breaths, you're building up oxygen. The drive or the signaling for oxygen to reach the cells in the body of where we want them to go isn't there. Is that correct?
Yeah, and with the breathing rate as well. And yeah, but yeah, you're right there, Mitch.
I just think that's such a misconception. It's really great to talk about, which is like, yeah, no, I think lots of heavy breathing will aid my performance. It's like, no. If anything, like longer, slower breaths, having a thirst for oxygen is where you're really going to see your increase happening. And I read a study. I listened to a podcast with Patrick talking to a gentleman, and he referred to one particular study. I think it was either the Australian Sevens rugby men or the Australian sort of standard rugby team. They were doing sprint development, and half the group did it with an exhalation nose hold. They did all their sprint development in a breath hold, and the other group just did it, breathing as per how you want. And what was really interesting over time was that the group that did it on the exhalation breath hold, their velocity went up compared to the group that was breathing however they wanted to. So there's something really interesting happening in this space. And I think this is just another one of those conversations where it's just getting everyone's thoughts to shift and to start to play with these things. Would you agree?
Yeah, and it's like anything, just bringing awareness to it, Mitch, right? And it's just like if through this call that you finally bring awareness to, how someone breathes in proper breathing, that's going to make a massive difference in their life, just straight up like that. And so it's like anything, and bringing that awareness to use that in a sprint hold, or for the warm up, or for recovery, and all that is going to slowly come to light. So bringing awareness to it's the most powerful thing we can do.
And we're moving through this nicely because I think we spoke on holotropic work. It's some deep, more powerful mental emotional releases. We've spoken about the benefits of nose breathing. We've talked about different implications of how we can use breathing in a performance sort of setting into a different part of performance. Let's talk about recovery and how breathing can be used. That's probably where my biggest connection to this has come from, the slowing down, the increasing of that parasympathetic rest and digest part of the nervous system has been where I've spent most of my time. Can you share your experience with slower breathing, that parasympathetic rest and digest, and where it fits in your world?
Yeah, so I would split my intentions with the breathing into those 3 parts of warm up, in session, and recovery. And for the recovery, especially where I was, and I'll use in China for example, they train the athletes hard, really hard, very quite old school volume, no days off sort of mentality. Yeah, they're getting fairly worked, and so recovery was probably the most important thing for me to be aware of, and the most importantly way that I could have a positive effect. And so bringing awareness to the breath played dividends in recovery. And for me, quite simply, just getting those, and we did breathing pretty much the majority of the sessions for recovery once once I got buy-in, because it's the quickest way. It was the quickest way to tap them into a parasympathetic state before they were leaving the gym, and put them in a rest and digest state. And so for me, I thought, if I can do that, and if they can leave the gym already beginning to rest, then they're going to have the maximal time before the coach flogs them the next morning for them to be recovering, as best as possible. And for me, that would look like teaching them how to slow their exhales, especially, and give them the tools to slow their exhales over their inhales. And some days I would just get them to lie down and connect to their breath and to breathe. And some of them would pass out eventually, so I'd look to do it I'd try and push it for 10 minutes, but some of them would slow it down so much that they would pass out. And that to me was a win, because you're trying to get them into that rest state. And so that would be a big focus, whether we were stretching, or whether we were sitting down talking, whether they were just breathing. It was a big focus for my stuff. And a lot of it would be trying to lengthen exhales longer than the inhales, and really just slow that breath right down. And simply just by doing that would just slow them down. And that was the focus. Well, it wasn't the only focus, but that was one of the main focuses of recovery. And so to me, so simple, because that's what they needed.
I think that's, if you're a coach or you're an athlete listening to this, I think that's one of the first places that you can start to drip this in. It may, I can't remember if you said this is where you started, putting it into your sessions, but it's really easy to, because recovery is so big now, like that's been the last big growth period, and it's, where can this breathing fit in? It's just so nicely set up for that recovery protocol. And like you said, it's so easy to, all you have to do is just, you can either lie down or sit up and extend that exhalation, and you're driving your physiology into that calm state. And if they do it for 5, 10, 15, there's a predominant feeling of change that, someone's going to feel, and they're going to go, wow, like I've never had that experience. Is that where you started dripping your breathing practice into the whole system that you create?
Yeah, that and the warm up for me. And I had a lot of freedom, right, in my last role. So I could bring this in a lot heavier, but that would be where I would start if I was in a program that was, a less open-minded, or I had less freedom with that, for sure, Mitch. And what I like it at the end as well is because you can really start to, while doing that, you can bring intent into it, and you can really teach the athletes or the person to feel, to come back to feeling. And so you can really feel your heart in that state. You can really feel your body. Notice how your body feels after the training session, and feel your muscles relax. And really, you can push that. And in the end, when it's quiet, when you finish the session, and that will help bring awareness back for the athlete into their body, and bring them back in and how they feel. And as a lot of the time we're spending a lot of time in our heads rather than like also in our body and feeling what's going on. We're spending a lot of time thinking what's going on and thinking what we need to do, as opposed to feeling and tapping into that energetic body.
And so I suppose that type of breathing is more synonymous with what you're alluding to, which is a type of meditation, breath-focused awareness, meditation styles of breathing. What's your experience with meditation, and how do you see that also playing out in this field, this athletic space?
Yeah, so that was part of what Mum taught us when we were young as well. And as I've grown up, I've missed very few days of meditating, and that for me is such a big part of my life, and I've seen the influence that it has. And when I don't do it, what that allows me to do is to really control my state, control my mind, control how I feel in that sense. And so being able to introduce it slowly, surely, within training, especially in recovery times like that, just allows the athletes to have a little taste of what's going on, and help share with them what I've learned and what works for me in that sense. But it doesn't have to be so structured for them if it's such a limitation to get into. If it's it might be a block for some athletes, be like, oh, meditate. No, I can't meditate. That's hard, or that's woo woo or whatever. You can easily meld it in the end without them even knowing they're meditating. So, and then you can move further. If they enjoy that, if they take to that, you can move it further. You can take that deeper. But it's a nice way to put it in. And especially for me, some of the challenges I had was I didn't and still do not speak Chinese, and so for me, the simpler it could be, and the easier it was, and the fewer words I said, the better. And so sometimes the simpler the better, and that's especially what I've learned and what I've hopefully taken away from China is, simpler the better.
Okay, so let's say you've got the buy-in for your cool down and recovery. People are doing extended exhalations, and they're really enjoying the relaxation benefits from that. But there is still a focus and a sort of meditation on, if your mind wanders off, you just want to come back to getting back to that long extended exhalation and so on. Let's say if someone comes up to you at the end of the class and say, hey, I want to take this to the next level, Kurt. If we're using, like what you just said, simple terminology to a young Chinese boy, what are you saying cue wise, technique wise, to take it to that next level of depth within that space of meditation?
Yeah, so for me, I'd be cueing more of a visualization meditation with that person who is interested, for example. So I'd be looking to support them in building their energy for what they want to get out of where they want to go, and supporting them along that. So for me, I'd be cueing them just quite simply on, seeing and feeling where, for example, the baseball pitches that actually took to this Mitch. So the baseball pitches like this, seeing themselves on the mound and seeing them and feeling themselves pitching at their best, and what it feels like to be throwing at their best that day, what it feels like to, hear the crowd at the China games, as they're pitching on the mound, what it feels like to be so dialed in and to know what needs to be done in that moment, and just simply putting it like that, and make sure, if I was putting it in speaking to that young Chinese man, I'd just be like, feel what it's like for you to be on that mound, and feel what it's like for you pitching at your best with no limitations. And all I want you to do is feel it and see it. That's it. And that's as simple as I would be, and because it would need to be that simple. And then I'd leave him by just saying, enjoy it, and then hold that space for him to be able to do that, and go from there.
And how long are you? I'm assuming that they're breathing while they're doing that. There's still some breath awareness. And how long are they kind of in that visualization? But like you said, more importantly, looking to curate and really connect to that feeling of what a successful pitch is. How long is that process? What does that actually look like?
It's as long as I've got time. It's as long as we've got time for, Mitch. But because that's a priority for me, and because inefficiency is a thing over there, I'd have long periods of sessions, so like 2-hour sessions. So I could spend a nice chunk of time at the end to be able to go into this. So for me, that recovery would be could be up to 20 to 30 minutes, really. And that breathing would be a massive part of that. So if I was looking specifically for a session like that for meditation / visualization work, then I'd set aside at least 15 minutes for that, 15, 20 minutes for that at the end. If that's what I was aiming to hit specifically, then we put a nice big chunk into that, drop them into that space, and then get them feeling for as
Mm.
long as possible. Because as you know, Mitch, the longer we can get them to be in that feeling and hold that feeling in whatever they do, that's what's going to help manifest that.
Mm. Speaking of feelings, you obviously do that for yourself, visualizing the life that you want to have and the day you want to have. Do you have a word or a feeling that you're really connected to at the moment, or something you're working on? What's your sort of daily practice with your system there?
So my daily practice will involve waking up, meditating, and quickly going to the gym to get my workout in before my daughter wakes up and before I'm on. And then during the day, I'll take periods out of my day to do some breathing. But specifically what I'm working on, Mitch, is right now surrendering. And as we spoke about a little bit off air, we're in a transition period at the moment within life. And so surrendering my control over the things that I can't control is key right now for me. And that's what I'm working on right now for me. And the more I surrender, the more I get back to my heart. The more I surrender, the more I don't think I can make something happen, and it will more get into the flow of life and the flow and joy of life. And that's what will allow things to happen and to come my way. And so that's what I'm working on at the moment, just surrendering and enjoying where I'm at in the present day. And, visualizing what it feels like to work with athletes in this holistic space, in this holistic level, and doing what I love and giving what I love, and just holding that and believing that. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, Mitch.
You had a big smile on your face because you told me off air, the kind of period of time you've had for COVID, and it was like you were coaching overseas. You guys wanted to, have your child back in Canada, but then there was some time where you weren't able to be with your new family, and a whole host of lovely visa issues. Any coach or anyone who's worked overseas know what that's like. And I'm assuming you smiled when I asked that question because you've healed a lot of what that journey has taught you. That's why you're smiling. How does this lifestyle of breath, awareness, meditation enable you to uptake the lesson rather than pushing it away, and it helping you to become who you want to be?
Yeah, Mitch, that's a great question. And yeah, I love that, mate. But the breath helps me not push it away, Mitch. The breath helps me feel what's going on. Breath helps me have to deal with it. And I say have to because sometimes we don't want to deal with these things that are coming up in our lives. Sometimes we just want to say F you, and the world sucks and it's tough and it's hard and poor me. The breath, for me, doesn't allow that. The breath makes me feel, makes me step into that, makes me step into the challenges that are going on, and to feel them and to release them. And so the breath allows me to release, and if it's released, it's out of your body, and you're not holding on to it, and it's not dragging you down, and it's not in your energy, it's not in your face, it's not in your body. And that's what I think is one of the most powerful parts of the breath that can help alchemize and transmute what is going on and what's inside and what you want to release. And you need awareness for that as well, right? And to specifically dive into it like that. So that's how the breath works for me. And I'm actually really enjoying it because it's winter right now. So there comes another aspect and another challenge of the cold, and using the breath to warm up and to alchemize in the cold and to build that resilience in that way. So yeah, and holotropic breathwork taps right into that, and that's as much I need that as much as my medicine, as I like to give it out. And support with it as well. So I'll often take myself aside and see if my wife can look after Aurelia for an hour or so and just dive into breathing and do what needs to be done and release the anger that's in there for things maybe not falling my way, or the frustration that's out there that things aren't moving as fast as I believe they should be moving, and just tapping in and getting raw. And the rawer I can get, the more that holds space for my family, the more that helps open my heart for my family and for what's to come. And you're not holding the rest of the baggage that's going on.
It's going to be some lucky athletes that you get your hands on next, because you've just gone through another PhD of your own exploration, using your own techniques to overcome your own stuff.
That's life, isn't it, mate? That's the best. That's
the
best part of it.
I think that's it's a misconception. It's all this stuff's happening to me. All this stuff's happening to me. No, it's happening for you. It's happening for you. We do need some tools to help us move through these things. And so we've rounded off some nice topics today. And bro, you and I can talk a lot more about, the goings on of life and that journey, but it's nice to get a little insight into your reality and what's been happening for you, and how you've, more importantly, been moving through it rather than staying static and angry and frustrated and stagnant in your process. So good for you, man. I can relate. And the more men and women, but lots of men, needs to step into this space. And it's not woo-woo. It's moving you more into who you came here to be. And I can just hear it in your relaxed tone. You are who you are, and that's just going to come more and more. So yeah, I'd love to hear that, mate. Getting towards the end of the podcast, like to ask a couple of set questions to finish off our conversation. And one of these questions is, what would you love to tell your younger self that you know now to help that younger you transition into the more of the man that you've become today? What are 3 lessons that you'd love to share with that younger Kurt?
Oh boy, there's so much. I think the first one would be to not worry so much. No, don't worry so much, young fella. It's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. And there's absolutely no need to worry. And I say this in the general sense of worrying about exams, worrying about, to a certain degree, like university marks, to a certain degree, just go in and enjoy experiencing life. And two, I would say, and you might laugh at this one, but 2, I'd say, don't worry about girls, Kurt. Don't worry about girls. And I'm not saying that in the sense that, I never chased girls in the way that I know that you're thinking, Mitch. I was more like, I was so excited to find my partner and find my forever partner from a young age. And so for me, and looking at that young age, don't worry about girls. Just worry about what you're here to do. Just worry about enjoying your life, what you're here to do, your experiences. And that was massive for me, because I was like, oh, where's a partner come from, stuff. And it's like, oh my God, look back now, it's like, geez, it's so silly. So that, that's a funny one. And three, I'd just say believe in yourself. Just believe in yourself, Kurt, because it's all there. It's always been there. You're a special boy, and believe in yourself. That's it.
Let's pull a thread on that, because that's really close to my heartstrings. I used to not believe in myself. What are some ways in which you've unearthed your capacity to believe in yourself?
Not accept who I am, but honor who I am, Mitch. And that is a very heart space, strong human being who cares a lot about people, but someone who's extremely heart-based, and honor that in environments where it's tough, like some performance environments, right, are tough, are harsh, are hard. Honor that and be that, and just be you and own that, and you don't have to be anyone else other than you, and believe that that's enough, because that's special. Just because it doesn't look like this or like that, because these are other people you look up to, doesn't mean that what you have isn't special and isn't valued and isn't enough. Like for example, Mitch, I thought I didn't, being a strength and conditioning coach and thinking the way that I do and feeling the way that I do from a younger age, I thought, holy shit, I don't belong here, because I don't have anything to offer here, because I don't care about the difference between a back squat and a front squat to the depth that some people care. I don't really care about that. It's like, do I belong? Do I have anything to offer this field in that sense? Because I don't, that stuff doesn't bother me so much. It's the heart work. It's the shifting of tapping into the person to help performance. I was like, do I have anything to offer here? Because it wasn't looking like that. So that's an example I would say from my past in that.
Kurt, if people want to reach out and connect to you, the second last question on the show, where can people find you? Where can we see you putting out content, etc.? Where are you hiding over there in Montreal for the wide world to now be seeing?
Yeah, I'd be hiding on my Instagram account, and Kurt Tropiano, and yeah, that's where I'll do most of my communication through, and you can find me through there and through my emails through there, and always happy to jump on calls and chat about anything, about coaching, about breath, about all the good stuff.
And can you spell your Instagram handle out, brother?
Yeah, so it's Kurt, KURT .TROPIANO.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I started following you, and it's must be a bit of an explosion. It's like everyone wants to do a podcast episode with you. So yeah, it's just this beautiful time for you, mate. Congratulations. And to the very last question on the Love Over Fear podcast, Kurt, what does choosing a life of love over fear look like to you?
Yeah, well, I define fear as, fear's the only reason of fear is to create more fear for me. And so choosing love over fear to me looks like living a heart-based life and choosing what feels good and what feels alignment to me and my soul, over what I think I should do or what other people think I should do.
Savage. So it's just that self journey just coming through and walking that walk and talking that talk and more importantly, walking it. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, it's always been a part of me, right? My heart's been one of my biggest assets. And for me, it's always been there, and it's owning that. And it's owning that. So I feel like I'm lucky because I don't have to figure out how to find my heart. It's already there. It's already in everything I do. And so I feel very fortunate in that. It's more living that and just embodying that in every aspect. That is the harder part / challenge.
Mate, that is a great way to finish up this conversation. Once again, like I said at the start, really appreciate your time and effort to be up so early for this conversation. I've definitely stayed up a little bit past my normal bedtime, so we're pushing the envelope of what's the standard. And thanks so much for coming on today, mate. I really appreciate you.
Mitch, thank you so much for having me, mate. We could chat about this for hours, I think, mate. But I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been really nice to chat to you.
Mate, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good, mate.
Cheers, mate. Bye.